Trip that we made here was to show Canadians that we still have this connection with Britain, and that the treaties were made by our ancestors with Queen Victoria as being invoked as the sovereign who made treaties with us.
Sometimes the nation state does not also like us going internationally, because we get our message out. Because the world needs to know that Canada is a great place to live, but unfortunately for the Indigenous peoples, there's still great poverty. There's still oppression. There's still economic marginalization. Those things are still persisting in Canada.
It's very important for me to be here, not only to commemorate with the other chiefs the significance of the proclamation, but also to perhaps get new energy in terms of going forward and continuing the work, so that Canada at large will know more about the Royal Proclamation. Yes, they may know it was in 1763, but what they may not know is through the Constitution of Canada, it still applies today.
Are still reserved for the said Indians, as aforesaid, to remove themselves from our settlements. So again, recognition of our lands and titles. Royal Proclamation of 1763 as our Magna Carta, in a way, because it opened up all these countries for settlement, because it paved the way for treaties. This paved the way for the treaty-making process, and it recognized our sovereignty and nationhood, and that's a big thing. So that's why we say we're not ethnic minorities. We might be 4% of the population in Canada, but we might be low in numbers, but that doesn't make us ethnic minorities. We're Indigenous peoples with our own land, laws, and languages, and our own identifiable people inherent right, and it's recognized here. This forms part of Canada's Constitution. It's referenced as part of Canada's Constitution.
It really is stunning to be in the presence of history, but to see once again affirmed in such a tangible way the understanding way back then that you're dealing with sovereign nations, and that idea, which would seem enlightened now, that it existed back then. It's the seeds of a better future found in the past.
Well, the Crown, through the Royal Proclamation, made one of many important promises that included that the Crown, even before Canada was established, would be there to support, protect the Indigenous nations in what is now called Canada. And this is brought forward in contemporary terms in the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. It reminds Canadians and the Canadian government that it is a successor state, that as such it inherited, as did all Canadians, an obligation to support First Nations, and in fact to recognize that all Canadians are treaty peoples with an obligation to support the implementation of those treaties in the spirit and intent with which the First Nations peoples understood them. In other words, that it's about equity, it's about mutual respect, it's about seeing one another both formally and informally. Moment of reckoning, and the Indigenous young people are saying we need to come together like never before. We're stronger when we come together. Those barriers were not created by us, including provincial, territorial, and international boundaries. And by extension, they're reaching out to, as we discuss here, the settler community, saying, you didn't create the Indian Act or the residential schools either. You by yourself did not make it so that this would not be taught in schools, and so therefore the children don't understand the principles embedded in Treaty Number 3 that we should support learning about each other. But that doesn't mean we can't do something about it.
Because this is the Global Day of Action in solidarity with Idle No More, and we wanted to show our solidarity right here in London for Indigenous land rights.
Britain was built on stolen wealth from the colonies, and everything, we're in the heart of London today. Everything we see around us has, if you go far back enough, it has its basis on economic relationships that were deeply, deeply exploitative, and that still have effects both here and in Canada.
One of the reasons I've been trying to learn more and understand more about Indigenous sovereignty in Canada is because of the Canadian government pushing tar sands and pushing tar sands into Europe, and Europe being a big import of the Canadian tar sands, and the impact that the extraction of the tar sands is having on First Nations people and their lands and livelihoods and health.
The exciting thing is more and more people are waking up. They're waking up to the injustices and inequalities, and I think people just in general are frustrated because there's a lot of people benefiting from treaty and there's a lot of people who aren't.
I believe that we're entering an era of reconciliation, and for me and the people I represent, this is the era of Indigenous peoples. It's been a long time coming that we would take our rightful place in our respective territories, and the Royal Proclamation and treaties say that we're not to do this alone, that we're all treaty people, that we're all here to stay in our respective territories, including in what's now called Canada.